Thank you, Sandy. Appreciate it. And I'm standing in for Dr. Mark Lattimore, who is the chair of ECOP. He is tied up in another panel with Rick Clemmy, so I'm backup hitter here. So so far we have close to 40 people. And this is a conversation, Learning for Leaders Opportunity, hosted and presented by ECOP. And as I said, normally Dr. Mark Lattimore would be hosting this. It's going to be talking about capturing Extension's leadership on climate and extreme weather. And it's going to be composed of a few remarks from me, followed by some remarks by some E-Extension fellows. And then we'll have some examples of work already being done on climate from 3 different institutions in the United States. We'll have questions and answers at the end, and then we'll close up and we'll have contact information for any of you who want to follow up with any of us who are presenters or ECOP or generally speaking. So let me just provide a little context for you, let you in on what this is really all about. This is what we're calling the Climate Coalition, and it's an initiative of E-Extension and its members, whose purpose is to help Extension coordinate its efforts and identify the work Extension is collectively doing across the country, identifying gaps of work that could be done, and determine how to accelerate our efforts on climate and weather variability. The rationale for this is that whether you call it climate variability, weather change, climate adaptation, it's an existential issue of the next century. It's an issue that our scientists and our institutions and our researchers are saying if not addressed, if it's not planned for, if we don't find a way to mitigate it, it will threaten the quality of the lives of our citizens in the United States and across the globe. And it will be disruptive, if not even destructive, in the sense that it will be undermining our ecological systems upon which we all depend, and those will include our food systems, availability of clean water, interrupt and diminish our the ecology and feedstocks in our oceans. They'll have impacts on shelter and our energy, and the list goes on. So the rationale here is, given these kinds of stakes, Extension actually has an opportunity to leverage its globally unique system of science-based research, education, and technical assistance to help make progress on this issue by using trusted members of our community. Those are our Extension educators that are located and practicing in virtually all 3,140 counties in the United States of America. So the idea here is, if we as a collective organization and system are able to make real progress and demonstrate leadership on this issue, we will improve the quality of lives of the people we serve every day. We will provide enormous research and education opportunities for our host institutions. We'll make all the other work we do, all the other programs we implement, more meaningful and enduring. And probably most importantly, we will help the next generation on a critical issue they're facing and they're inheriting from our generation. Thus far, a number of Extension directors, of which I'm one, but not alone, have been working with E-Extension, run by Chris Geith, as a backbone organization to help build this collaborative effort across Extension nationally to address this most important issue. We've agreed we need to assess the work we are currently doing, because it's extensive, measure it against some action goals, identify the gaps of work that aren't being done, and determine how we might otherwise accelerate the progress on this issue. Part of this work is going to include storytelling of our efficacy and of the opportunity, so others will join our cause and support this critical work. And so to that end, E-Extension has hired a number of fellows to assess our work and measure it against the action goals as set forth in Paul Hawkins' work, Project Drawdown, and we may identify some other goals against which we may measure as we learn more about this going forward. Project Drawdown identifies 100 of the most effective actions that can be taken to sequester carbon and mitigate climate issues. The Extension Fellows will reach out to Extension organizations across the country to build a database that captures our collective effort. And at that time, we'll be able to start to tell the story of our effectiveness as an extension system. We'll begin to engage in conversations about what's missing, given our now understanding of the work all of us are doing, and start to generate proposals to fill those gaps and to accelerate progress on this issue. Now, some of the critical steps of this work are going to be telling the stories of Extension's efficacy, of the work we're already doing, the impact we're already making, oftentimes not even seen necessarily as a climate adaptation work. And it's also going to be important to identify those gaps that should be researched and actions that could be taken. And as I said earlier, identify strategies to accelerate progress so we can get ahead of this issue for the benefit of the next generation. And in so doing, we're going to inform a research agenda. We will help educate people from across our country. We will better inform action that we all may be able to take. And it will help our children and our grandchildren. So that's kind of the frame. It's a collaborative effort among extension directors funneled through E-Extension, and today hosting a conversation by ECOP of this very initiative. So with that, I think I'd like to turn it over to our first of a number of fellows, as I understand it. And let me see if I got this right. Our first fellow would be, all right, Jennison, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ross. So I'm going to give a quick introduction. Extension has literally been a part of my life since day one. This photo behind me, that's me in an advertisement, a promotion for Ag Progress Days in Pennsylvania in the early 80s. So I grew up around it. My graduate research in ag economics was at Penn State, and it was funded by the US Global Change Research Program. And it was part of the consortium for the Mid-Atlantic Regional Assessment of Climate Change Impacts. So today, I'm an ecological economist working with the University of Florida IFAS Extension, where I work with a group called the Program for Resource Efficient Communities. I coordinate sustainability programs, and I've been very fortunate to work with Dr. Place since he joined UF here. I characterize myself as a systems thinker and a lifelong learner and an ambassador for inclusion, and I really am honored to be part of this team, this fellows team. I think it's a fantastic, timely, and extremely important opportunity for Extension to showcase all of the great work we're doing, but more importantly, to amplify that work and to be more inclusive and have a focus on equity. So I'm really excited about it, and I appreciate you all being on the call. Looking forward to working with you.
All right, I think next is either Sarah or Rosalind.
I'll go next. My name is Sarah Klein, and I have a PhD from the Institute for Resources, Environment, and Sustainability at the University of British Columbia. And I call myself a solutions-oriented social scientist. In a big picture way, the global issues that I engage most with are climate change and biodiversity loss. Also, much of my research is participatory. And I also frequently partner with nonprofit organizations in my research. My past research has advanced methods for identifying and incorporating social and cultural values into ecosystem service assessments and environmental management. My current research and much of the teaching that I do at Utah State University in the Environment and Society program, my current research and teaching focuses on public preferences and policy dimensions of energy systems, including transitioning to low carbon energy systems. Several of my past projects focused on offshore wind farms, and I collaborated with a nonprofit to identify lessons learned from how wind farm developers engaged island communities that were adjacent to proposed offshore wind farms. So I've also conducted some research related to risk perception as it connects to environmental impacts associated with wind farm development. Currently, I'm shifting my focus to utility scale solar and opportunities to reduce the local impact, ecological impact of this infrastructure, and also increase the acceptance of this utility scale infrastructure. So I'm excited to work with this climate fellowship team, and it's an opportunity for me to learn more about the breadth of cooperative extension programs across the US. And I absolutely see extension activities as critical for disseminating climate solutions. And I'm looking forward to digging into this project with this team. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So Rosalind, are you on?
Sure, yeah, I can go next. So hi, everyone. I'm Rosalind Brain McCann. I'm a Sustainable Communities Extension Specialist in the Department of Environment and Society at Utah State. And actually, during my PhD, I worked with Dr. Place and others with a major in agricultural extension and minor in environmental education, where I worked to predict cattle rancher engagement in conservation easements. But back up to present day, this climate change fellowship really is prominent on my mind because I worked with a team, including Jennison in 2017, where we conducted a national survey through the National Network of Sustainable Living Education. And that revealed that one of the top 3 emerging issues perceived by over 1,000 extension educators across the country was climate change. And so this fellowship is really timely, connecting with that top perceived need by extension educators. But it also relates directly to some of the work that I do in my USU Extension Sustainability Initiative. And some major projects currently that I'm engaged in include the USU Extension Permaculture Initiative, which provides ecological design webinars and teaching sites across the state. I'm currently analyzing my national qualitative interview recordings from my sabbatical research, and we'll be publishing on that within the next year. And then a couple of years ago, I worked on a team to develop an Extension Climate Change Science Essentials online Train the Trainer course through USU Extension. So that's for extension educators to really get their feet under them regarding the science of climate change. And we aren't talking about how to communicate that with their clientele, because educators really understand that part the best. They understand their clientele the best. It's more really getting up to speed of the science behind what's occurring with climate change. And then on the kids side, I developed back in 2013 a Sustainable U Kids Camp, a 4-H camp that has been downloaded and taught across the country with an anticipated annual reach of over 20,000 youth. And I'm currently updating that curriculum and adding in a few more units into that, and we'll publish the new edition this summer. And then every year I run with a colleague a Utah High School Clean Air Poster Contest, and that's been a really fun initiative that has been featured in various national news outlets, including Forbes magazine and PBS, and just has gotten a lot of traction, really presenting the science to youth about our air quality in the state and PM 2.5 and what that does to our health, and then effective marketing techniques. And they use their knowledge of popular songs and movies and things like that and develop educational posters that really tap into popular culture, and those have been extremely popular. And the last initiative that I'm really engaged with currently is Utah Farm Chef Fork. So I'm a PI on a USDA FMPP grant that is working to connect low-income and ethnic minority populations across the state to the local food movement. And this is primarily through marketing, farm dinners, and promotion and expansion of SNAP and Double Up food bucks. And so when participants come to a farmer's market and they spend, like, say, $10 or even $20, Double Up food bucks will double that amount, and they can get double the amount of produce from those outlets. And so with that initiative, we also created and are coordinating a Utah Farmers Market Network through the same project. And that's been really beneficial right now with COVID, because we've been helping the markets with guidelines on how to move forward and open this summer. And so that's been taking a lot of my time. And so I'm really excited to be part of this fellowship. It really lines up with a lot of the work that I'm doing, and the need is very obvious and pressing.
Great. Thanks, Rosalind. And I think, Paul, you're on too. You want to make a few remarks here at this moment?
Thanks. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Paul LaChapelle. First, I want to just thank all of you who are actively involved and working on climate issues, specifically Chuck and all of your colleagues for moving this conversation forward. I'm originally from Vermont, where I did my undergrad work. I studied at the University of Montana in Missoula in the College of Forestry for my master's and PhD, and I'm now currently with MSU Extension, Montana State University Extension, serving as the Community Development Specialist, and I'm also a professor in the Department of Political Science. We were asked to bring what strengths that we have to this team, and I think I bring two strengths. First, I've been actively working on climate education for over 7 years. I developed a 4-H youth curriculum for ages 7 through 11, which has been awarded national peer-reviewed status with the National 4-H Council. Last year, I published an edited book through Routledge titled Addressing Climate Change at the Community Level in the United States, with 45 contributing authors, many of them with Extension. I'm leading a statewide effort called Climate Smart Montana, where we're linking city planners and government officials and citizens in climate resiliency planning. And I'm also working with colleagues in NACDEP and ANREP and other associations, and also our Sea Grant partners on a brand new initiative called the National Extension Climate Initiative. We now have over 125 members, and our objective is to just share climate education and research resources and create a platform for networking. The second strength I think I bring is to this team is my resolve to actively engage in what, Chuck, you, I think, correctly referred to as an existential threat, what many scientists are now calling a planetary emergency. And I think these are the terms that we need to talk about this in. I recognize that, you know, according to the most recent data, we have only about 8 years left before we burn through our carbon budget. That's the amount of additional greenhouse gases that we can emit, and still have a 66% chance of keeping temperatures below 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's what the IPCC and our National Academy of Sciences and other scientific organizations and academies have termed a safe threshold. So what we need to be talking about is a rapid decarbonization of our society, and we need bold leadership, from extension directors all the way down to field agents. So really happy to be a part of this effort, and I'll also post some of the resources that I just referenced in the chat. So thanks, and really happy to be with you all.
Great. Thanks very much, Paul. Appreciate your participation. And I think we have one more person we want to listen to before we turn it over to our state folks, and that's Dakota Pinto. Are you on?
Yes,
Dakota?
I am.
All right. Here you are. Good.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Dakota Pinto. I'm a master's student at Utah State University in the Environment and Society Department. I'm working with Dr. Sarah Klein, who introduced herself a little earlier. I'm originally from South Florida, where I studied environmental studies at Florida Gulf Coast University. And what kind of got me into this environmental field in the first place was growing up in Florida, I was always surrounded by emerging environmental issues, ranging from one of the bigger ones is water management, from sea level rise to water quality, and then invasive species to major biodiversity loss. So these issues kind of persuaded me to take an interest in what I can do to help improve these destructive processes, because if humans kind of continue with the business as usual thought process, the beautiful places and things that I grew up with in Florida could be underwater, and a lot of places are already underwater and gone from, you know, when I grow up. During my time in the environmental field, I've been a part of a number of projects that have had to do with engaging in community and environmental rejuvenation. For example, I led a group in one of the courses that I took in my undergrad that worked with researchers from a place called the Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge. What we did was we brought people in from the community in the surrounding bay and estuary area and educated them on the importance of seagrass beds to not only the ecological community in the estuary, but also to the humans in the local area whose livelihoods depend on the nurseries that the seagrass beds provide and whatnot. And one of their biggest focuses was saltwater intrusion on a specific species called tapegrass. And with sea level rises, kind of occurring in Florida, saltwater intrusion is becoming a much bigger issue, and a lot of the seagrass populations in the estuary have actually disappeared. And another way we engage with the community is after we finished educating them, we actually went out into the estuary bay area and waded around and went to key spots where tapegrass communities used to be. And we actually planted new tapegrass communities to just establish some new healthy populations. And that was an awesome time, and all the other kind of extension projects that I've been a part of have encouraged me to take an interest in bridging the academic science with the implementation of it, which kind of brought me to this kind of project and to Sarah's guidance, and that brought me to all of you. And I really thank you guys for this opportunity to work with you and on this extension project, and I'm really looking forward to learning more about all of it. So, yeah.
Dakota, thank you, and thanks to all the fellows and Paul. What a fantastic team. When Chris Guy said, yeah, we'll bring on some fellows, I had no idea we get this kind of quality. So really great to have how all of you engaged. I think it speaks volumes to the importance of this issue, and that we have the kind of caliber of folks working on this that you represent. So thank you. I also want to recognize Mark Lattimore, our leader of VCOP, who's been able to get himself extracted from his last meeting and join us here. So good to see you, Mark, and thanks for being a host for this whole conversation. Really appreciate it. So next up, we're going to turn to our states and our universities who have been doing this work as examples of what Extension's already doing. We are not sitting still. I would submit to you we are already leading. We just don't know how much we're leading. Because we haven't really assessed that yet, and that's part of the job of the fellows. But we're going to hear from three different states, if you will. We're going to be hearing from Texas, Vermont, and Minnesota. So first up is Dr. Ali Fares from Prairie View A&M University. So take it away. Thank you, Ali.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to share some of the work we've been doing at Prairie View A&M University. I am a faculty professor of water security at Prairie View A&M University. I've been serving Prairie View A&M University for in several capacities: Associate Dean for Research, Interim Dean for an land grant program, and also Interim Vice President. And right now I'm a faculty. Prior to that, I spent 11 years at the University of Hawaii, where the College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources. I am a graduate of the University of Florida, where I did my master's and PhD there. So I'm going to talk to you today about the results of ongoing research on COVID-19 air quality and climate change impact. So next slide will be introduction. So except for particular matter, the common air pollutants, also called greenhouse gases, include carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, ozone, sulfur dioxide. These selected pollutants are known for their harmful effect on human health, and they're known cause of severe environmental problems. However, many people don't realize that without these greenhouse gases, the average temperature on the Earth's surface would be negative 18 degrees Celsius instead of the current one, 15 degrees Celsius. There are two primary sources of greenhouse gases emission. These are the natural resource sources, which basically like volcanic eruptions, and anthropogenic resulting from human activities, mainly combustion of fossil fuels. This shows the strong link between economic activities and air pollution, which is well documented in the literature. So in response to COVID-19 pandemic, most of the countries have substantially reduced their economic activities. This offered to us one-in-a-lifetime opportunity to study the impact of collective response of COVID-19 on air quality and climate change in 240 major cities across the globe over the past few months in comparison with the same period of 2019. For this one, we downloaded daily weather and air quality data for these 240 cities from the World Air Quality Index website for the period of January 19 till May 2020. So after that, this data were used to calculate percentage monthly change in air quality levels globally, as shown in the next figure. I think these are you see the maps of the cities that we included in this study. So if you can go to the next slide, you will see some of the highlights of the results. So we calculated the percentage departure comparing the average monthly between 2019 and 2020 from February till April. So from these results, we can see, especially the ones in the middle of the graph of the global map there, the three levels of the greenhouse showed a significant decline. So you can see the red one showing the decline, the blue one showing the increase. Significant, especially in NO2 and particular matter 2.5 micron. It's clear, especially in Europe, which could be direct results of the slowdown in the economic activities. Highlights of the largest reduction in monthly pollutant levels in 2020 compared to 2019. So we have up to 63% reduction in NO2 in Wuhan, China in March, 61% reduction in carbon monoxide in Lima, Peru, up to 61% reduction in particulate matter 2.5 microns in Berlin, Germany. In contrast, ozone levels increased substantially and were as high as 86% in Milan, Italy, in apparent response to the titration of nitrogen monoxide and its derivatives. Will this trend in air quality improvement continue, and for how long? Will humanity seize this opportunity to sustain this positive impact on air quality permanently? What is the impact on underserved community and also on urban and rural communities? These are fundamental questions that could be further investigated. And the next slide, and the last one, I would like to acknowledge my co-authors, Rapendra Awal and Hamida Habibi, and also the support we got from NIFA for this project. I'd like to mention that I'm editing a book with the Springers called Climate Change and Extreme Events. Do we know enough? This will be ready in the end of the year. Thank you for this opportunity. I'll be happy to entertain any of your questions if I have time.
Great, thank you very much. And we will entertain questions, but let's hold them to the end. And so we'll proceed with the next state, which is the state of Vermont, the University of Vermont, and Kirsten Workman and Joshua Faulkner, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Chuck. I'm Joshua Faulkner. I'm a research assistant professor in UVM Extension, and coordinate the farming and climate change program with UVM Extension, and I've done so for about the past 7 years. And I think that's worth saying because UVM Extension made a commitment to climate change back when Tropical Storm Irene came up through New England, and we've had a dedicated program in place trying to work through some of these issues in fits and starts in agriculture. And so just want to talk about one of our efforts today, which is cover cropping. And I'm going to just make 3 quick points about cover crops, and then I want to hand it over to my colleague Kirsten to talk about the actual programming and boots on the ground and how this happens. So important to know is that in the Northeast, really the increase in extreme events is our #1 challenge. When it comes to climate change, we've seen a 74% increase in these types of events since about 1960. The next slide. And this causes problems on farms. As you might imagine, this intense rainfall results in erosion, much like you're seeing in this image here. This is me standing in in a cornfield in 2014 after a single storm event washed away probably a quarter acre to a half acre of soil down to it's mid-thigh on me, about 36 inches in depth. And I have a goofy grin on my face, and I shouldn't. This was tragic. But as a soil and water engineer by training, I hadn't seen gullies like this in a field outside of a textbook in school. And so it's cover crops that are part of the response to this threat of extreme events, and what we've been promoting because of their ability to cover surface soils, prevent soil aggregate destruction, prevent erosion. They provide one primary route for adaptation by farmers on these annual crop fields. Next slide. And then it's not just the ability of cover crops to help farmers adapt to climate change. What farmers in Vermont, and we're very interested in now gaining interest in, is cover crops' ability to provide mitigation to climate change. And so their ability to increase carbon sequestration in soils. And I have just a little bit of data here. This comes from a review paper on cover crops and carbon sequestration from late 2018, and just looks at kind of a best case scenario, that high estimate level across the bottom, and then a medium case scenario. And this is probably the most likely case scenario. And looking at the level of carbon sequestration from cover crops, the equivalent passenger vehicles in Vermont, if we were to cover crop our entire 80,000 acres, just a drop in the bucket when you think nationwide, but it's a lot of land here in our small state of Vermont. And then if we could engage farmers in some sort of payment for ecosystem services program, what the value of that would be to farmers, given a value on the California carbon market of a little over 15 bucks a ton of CO2 equivalent. And so these are our motivating factors, and I'm going to turn it over to Kirsten now to talk about the programming.
Yeah, so if you can switch to the next slide. So in addition to climate change adaptation and what Joshua mentioned about these extreme rain events, which are often followed by some droughts, we have a huge push in Vermont, and especially in the Lake Champlain Basin, to address water quality issues. And one of the best practices we can do for both of those goals is cover cropping. And we like to say in Vermont that we have the highest per capita everything. So while our acres of corn land may be low, you can see that over the course of a 5-year period with a very large push, not only with Extension, but our partners with conservation districts, our State Department of Agriculture, and our funders through Nrcs and EQIP and programs like that. We were able to quickly, with some emphasis, go from almost no corn silage fields being cover cropped up until 2018. We started to plateau a touch, and we ended up getting about 30% or 34,000 acres of cover crop that year. And if you go to the next slide. So in addition to climate change adaptation and what Joshua mentioned about these extreme rain events, which are often followed by some droughts, we have a huge push in Vermont, and especially in the Lake Champlain Basin, to address water quality issues. And one of the best practices we can do for both of those goals is cover cropping. And we like to say in Vermont that we have the highest per capita everything. So while our acres of corn land may be low, you can see that over the course of a 5-year period with a very large push, not only with Extension, but our partners with conservation districts, our State Department of Agriculture, and our funders through Nrcs and EQIP and programs like that. We were able to quickly, with some emphasis, go from almost no corn silage fields being cover cropped up until 2018. We started to plateau a touch, and we ended up getting about 30% or 34,000 acres of cover crop that year. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that that's overall in the state, and I've circled the cover crop one there, but the blue bars is statewide adoption of things like cover cropping is where I've circled, but we also show manure injection and conservation tillage. We tend to see these things get adopted as a full system, at least that's sort of our hope. And what you can see there is statewide, we do see a 30% adoption rate, but the orange bar is a priority watershed where NRCS and the state identified some watersheds that they wanted to give pronounced and emphasized technical assistance. And you can see that the adoption rate in that watershed was 47%. And then the green bar represents a group of very progressive and innovative farmers that I work with that we were able to much closer inventory. And you can see that the adoption rate for those folks was closer to 65 or 66% of their cornland was cover cropped or had reduced tillage. And so you can see, depending on how you parse it out, you know, it looks a little bit different on the landscape, but we all are still meeting a pretty high threshold there. Next slide. And so I just wanted to really quickly, I think I'm already over time, share a few ways that we've done this. And, you know, how do we gain traction from none to 30%? And some of, you know, I won't read all those there, but basically, you know, we've had to sort of go all in with the farmers and be really practical and innovative and be risk takers alongside them. We've been trying very hard to plan and not have failures, but also recognize when we do have those failures. We're constantly monitoring and adapting and evolving the systems. And to be quite honest, once farmers sort of decide they're going to take this sort of thing on, you kind of, I just joke, like buckle in and hang on, because then you're just trying to keep up with them and understand how they're actually applying these practices. So it's really important to very much just quantify, monitor success. Don't be afraid of the weak points in the system, really kind of narrow down in on those and fix them and adapt. And we're constantly evolving the system, and we kind of talk at UVM Extension about this toolbox of things we have for farmers, so that if they're not willing to, say, shorten their day length on their corn, then we might have an interseeder where they can plant the cover crop before the corn is off. And we're blessed to have a group of extension folks here in Vermont who have fantastic can-do attitudes, as do our farmers. And we sort of have the mantra of getting to yes instead of, you know, oh, you can't do it that way. It's sort of like, oh, okay, how could we get that done? And so we really do try and set the tone and sort of facilitate, you know, cool things happening. We advocate for farmers and practices. We really plan and implement, and just sort of pay attention to the details. And if you go to the next slide, that's our last one, I think. And so, you know, for me, it's not just getting a farmer to try it, but really this long-term adoption is going to be the key, especially when we look at things like water quality and climate change. 1 year of cover cropping is not going to cut it. So some of the things that we sort of take into account is, you know, we have some producers that sort of dip their toe in the water. They might try a practice or a field before they'll go. And some farmers just sort of like go all in. And either way, you really got to get it right. Because if that tiptoe person has a failure, they may never come back, or at least not for another 20 years. And of course, if someone who adopts the whole system has a failure, then their neighbors all will be like, well, that didn't work. We've really been creative when it comes to funding really cool pieces of equipment. I have just a couple there on the slide with highboy interseeders, drill interseeders. We had a helicopter for the first couple years. I call those our charismatic megafauna. We sort of jump in and take that risk for the farmer until we can identify equipment that works really well here in Vermont. And when we find those, then we see farmers adopt them readily. We have a lot of demonstrations, plots and field days, really giving folks a chance to see it, not just in Vermont, but in their particular neighborhood. We really rely on our innovative farmers and those early adopters, and they can really help us recruit those folks that are sort of lagging behind a little bit. And we have 3 farmer watershed groups in Vermont that have been huge and vital to really set the tone and make a cultural shift. And then we've tried really hard to celebrate successes and really kind of you know, megaphone out those positive stories to the public, because we get a lot of pushback when we are in these manured systems about how farmers are bad for the environment. And so whenever we have the opportunity, we really try and share that story, not only with other farmers, but really the public. And also, you know, farmers know what's up. And so when I come and talk to them about cover crops, they sort of like shake their head and they know I want them to do it. But when their neighbor that's a farmer that they really respect and think highly of starts to do it, that's when they pay attention. And so I think that's why we've been able to get such good traction on these conservation practices in Vermont.
Great, thanks, Kirsten and Joshua. I really appreciate you presenting all that work that's getting done. And next up, we got the state of Minnesota, University of Minnesota. And Joel, I think you're online and ready to go.
Sounds great. Hi, everybody. My name is Joel Hasker. I am the co-director of the Clean Energy Resource Team's research program as part of the University of Minnesota Extension. We work across Minnesota to help communities identify and implement energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. So I'm kind of an energy geek. Next slide. This next slide is either interesting or confusing or both, but we are a partnership. So Extension is a very important part of that partnership. There's 8 full-time folks in the Extension world for certs, but there's also 4 full-time folks, and these other partners. The State Energy Office there at the Department of Commerce. We've been around since 2003. We work with the Great Plains Institute in the metro area, and then down in the southwest corner of the state, we work with the Southwest Regional Development Commission, where wind energy is a huge part of their economic development. You can even see by the wind turbines in their logo there. So the great news is this gives us a lot of capacity, a lot of bandwidth. The bad news is sometimes extension gets lost in the branding because there are 4 partners, so we have to give everybody kind of kudos for the work that they're doing. Next slide, please. Just briefly, you can see our regional coordinators. Another thing that makes, I think, this project interesting is each of those regions has a steering committee of folks that live in the region. So there's 10 to 15 folks that are environmental advocates. They are utility representatives. They are farmers, school superintendents. They are anybody who's got energy, or they're renewable energy developers. Anybody who's got energy as sort of a core piece of something they're working on. This is who we want on our steering committees. And you know, down in the south, for those folks interested in Minnesota geography, you know, down in the southern part of the state, we have ag lands, and in the northern part of the state, we have more forestry and lakes, things like that. So they have very different focus points on what they're working on, what matters to them locally. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit about what we do. I can get into a few more statistics, a few more specifics. We host a clean energy job board. Right now we've got a lot of, I'd love to talk to Sarah Klein later. Right now we've got a lot of farmers, probably 2 or 3 a week, asking us about solar. We always say, you know, energy efficiency first, eat your vegetables. But you can imagine solar and wind are the more exciting things for a lot of folks. So farmers have a lot of decisions to make, whether they want to do something on site just for their farm, or maybe they want an acre of solar for a community solar garden. But then some of them are looking at those industrial size or those industry size solar gardens, which can be you know, 5, 10, 15 football fields of solar. So suddenly we got a real big piece of the puzzle to be thinking through. There's over 180 electric utilities in Minnesota. So we're working with a lot of them, and a lot of the cities that they service on electric vehicle infrastructure is something that's taking up a lot of our bandwidth now. So I guess I would say solar and electric vehicles. If you're interested in any of these, we've got a lot of resources. I personally work with low-income communities or underserved communities. So right now with COVID-19, we've been trying to get all those different utilities to work with their food shelves to get LED bulbs, faucet aerators, low-flow shower heads into the hands of the folks that are coming into the food shelves. So I'm sort of coordinating that across the state. We also have a big project that's sort of put on hold because of COVID-19, working with manufactured homes or mobile home parks. The idea was to work with weatherization agencies and the utilities and to do a blitz in the entire park, 50 to 100 units, make sure everybody gets serviced, everybody gets something that to help their mobile home become more energy efficient and then also more comfortable, more safe. Next slide, please. We are, as I said, we're written into state statute. So every year we send a report about what we've done to the legislature. These are a few of the highlights that we, you know, it's about a 5-page report. Who knows if any of them read it, but here are some of the few highlights. I'd be happy to talk with folks about any of these projects in the future, but I think that might be the end for me because we're trying to keep it in 5 minutes and go to questions. So I think that's it. Thanks, guys.
Joel, thanks very much. And thanks to all of the presenters. You guys nailed it time-wise. I'm going to turn this over to Mark Lattimore in a minute to field the questions and so on. But just wanted to reiterate that appreciation for such good presentations, keeping on time and giving us 15 minutes to do Q&A. So it's over to you, Mark.
Okay, back to the drawing board. First of all, Chuck, thank you for starting this conversation. And as I was saying, that this conversation I just started within our circle several months ago, and it really got me excited to just hear Chuck talk about climate change, and all of you who participated in the conversation today, and the impact and also the contribution that you're making to this initiative. This is an initiative that's been around as far as I can remember back to undergraduate, and it has not gone away. So we have challenges. In order for us to really protect the earth, we have to keep this conversation going, and we have to continue to engage. Questions? Are there any questions?
Well, I got one, Mark.
Go ahead, please.
Dr. Ferris, I was wondering, as you were measuring and tracking all the reductions of air pollution as a function of the COVID lockdown, if you are seeing any or able to track any of those jurisdictions as to whether or not they're putting any policies or any proactive actions in place to retain the reduced level of air pollution.
Well, I think that's a great question. I guess, no, I did not see anything so far. I wish there is, because that's a very important. And I think more important about your question here is like, we have been pondering about what it takes to curb down this greenhouse gases. And I think this COVID-19 showed us that the answer is there. It's like we have to do something about reducing our emission, changing our solar, our energy sources, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a good opportunity for us to think about the alternative as it's possible to do it.
Great, thank you.
Kristen, this my question there was the number of farmers that have that are engaged in cover crop. Do you see this number constantly increasing? I know. Yeah, you indicated the demonstration, the workshops, and the works, but have they bought into it to the point where you see increases and increases in farmers that's engaging in cover crop?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We definitely, in that the very beginning, there was a lot of footwork, a lot of hand holding, a lot of helping find equipment, helping find seed, identifying the right species. We're still doing lots of research on those same topics. And what I've noticed is as our farmers have increased their adoption, we see two things. We see the number of farmers increase, and then we see individuals increase their number of acres. I would say that we've started to plateau just a bit, but what I've noticed is those farmers now are experts and they really don't need my help anymore, which is kind of a bummer because I like doing that kind of work. But no, they've really figured it out. They've purchased their own equipment. So one example would be we started off buying a no-till grain drill. Actually, we bought two 10-foot wide ones. And now I would say we probably have 24 farms across the state that own their own, as well as other service providers that bought shared equipment. I have a really good picture of our little 10-foot drill planting some plots in a big field and the farmer's 30-foot landall drill next to it, just going gangbusters doing the whole field. So, and I have particular farmers that cover crops is a tough one in particular because it's really hard to quantify an economic benefit because there's increased cost and increased complexity. Where no-till, it's pretty easy to pencil that out on paper. But those that have really gone all in will tell you that the cover crops is what make this conservation cropping systems work, and they would not get rid of it even if they didn't get cost share to do it. So that gives me some hope.
You mentioned no-till.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking no-till versus cover crops, and then the involvement of Nrcs.
Yep.
What conversation are you having with Nrcs along those two?
Yeah, and our Nrcs partners in Vermont are really fantastic. They really work side by side with us, both with individual producers, but with the funding programs as well. And so we've been able to kind of match those practices together pretty well, and actually sort of, they've evolved a little bit so that a farmer doesn't kind of age out of a 3-year cover crop contract and then they don't qualify for cost share anymore. So they've worked with us to identify ways we can do better with that. They also have provided us with, really great sources of funding in the form of conservation innovation grants to do the research and the work to get this kind of technology on the ground and get adoption. And so that has been a particularly fruitful relationship for everyone, because they had EQIP dollars that they weren't getting spent because farmers weren't adopting the practice. So by creating these CIG grants and watershed specific sort of technical assistant grants together, they have the deeper pockets. We sort of have the expertise in the relationships. We've really been able to hit it out of the park, I think.
Thank you.
And I see there's a few things in chat there too. I don't know if you can take a look at chat.
Yes, there was a question directed to me about, I read the question, has anyone evaluated the relationship between air quality changes and COVID cases? Well, we're trying to collect some data on this, trying to see the link between the correlation between the cases of COVID-19 or deaths and also the air quality on those locations. So because some locations, they have data, multiple area across the city. Like for example, New York has several locations where you can have air quality data available. And some other cities you don't. But I think we're working on that one to try to see if there is a linkage between the cases and the air quality improvement. Also, there is an issue of spatial variability across the city, because you can have areas where underserved community, low income community lives versus affluent area. And we're trying to find if there is also that spatial variability across city too.
Okay. We have
Hey, Mark.
Go ahead.
This is Chuck. I saw a question in the chat that was about ecosystem services. And one of the things that I think would be worth mentioning, and at least from Vermont standpoint and the work that Kirsten and Joshua and their colleagues do, not only are they really doing a great job pushing these conservation practices, these conservation practices are also enabling the farmers to make a huge contribution on one of the significant ecological challenges we have in Vermont, and that's the nutrient loading via phosphorus in our Great Lake Champlain. And what we've seen by virtue of the work that Kirsten has done and Joshua is that the farmers have contributed over 90% of the phosphorus reduction in the last couple of years statewide. That their initiatives are that effective, they're cost effective, and they're nutrient effective in terms of their impact. It's a really ripe opportunity, an example of the public getting a benefit and the farmers receiving multiple benefits. And I don't know if Kirsten or Josh would want to chime in on any more of that.
And I'll just say that because we're a primarily dairy producing state, you can imagine the kind of economic duress farms were under already before this most recent crush. And so the idea of being able to pay them for more than just their milk production is obviously quite attractive to them. I know that with the folks that I work with, the Champlain Valley Farmer Coalition, they're very engaged in those conversations. They would love to see a system where they own it a little bit and they can input their data and put it on the market. And if it's pea removal that someone's looking for, or if it's carbon sequestration, or maybe it's soil biology or something else. And so we're kind of going back and forth now between like, do we model it? Do we directly measure it? What's the infrastructure and how does it look? But it's a very ongoing conversation currently, for sure.
Can I pitch in something here about this question?
Sure.
I think part of my work in University of Hawaii, we did riparian buffer around streams, and we did, one of the work we did with this benefit cost analysis. And I think that's a good thing to do if possible. And we showed that these buffer streams are like, have a benefit to cost analysis of like 3.0 or some around 3. So that means every dollar you invest on these buffers, it gets back to the community or to the environment and everything, $3 back. So I think this is good, a way of showing that it's good to invest on these type of practices.
This is Chuck again. I think one of the things you're driving at is that our fellows are here to actually engage all of us as extension directors, and we should look forward to them contacting us and us being able to share with them the work that's being done in your institution, in your extension organization, that is addressing climate and weather issues. I think they're going to use the backdrop, if you will, of Project Drawdown as one set of metrics to measure against, but they may have some others. And the whole purpose of this is, right now we are telling stories a bit by a bit. You just heard from you in the University of Vermont. We just heard from 2 other institutions, but those are single stories. Collectively, if we can assemble all the work that's being done collectively across this country, there's a story there about the efficacy of extension on this issue and all the ancillary benefits like ecosystem services that can come from the work we're all doing collectively. And so that's part of the story the fellows are going to help us be able to tell by engaging you. So when they call, when they reach out to you, please engage with them or proactively engage with them through e-extension. And I think we may have some contact information here at the end on how to reach our fellows, because they're here to help us tell our story, identify the missing gaps, help us figure out how to accelerate, and in so doing, attract more attention, more support, identify more research opportunities, and make progress on this critical issue facing this century.
We just have a lot of resources around that, but it's something that farmers across the country are going to have to start thinking through, is what do they want to do with their land when they are approached by a developer about solar. And a lot of it has to do with the size of the project and what they think about it, what their neighbors think about it. Is this a good use of prime ag land or not? So I just think that this is something that extension people across the country, whether or not it's tied into thinking about climate or not, for these farmers, it's all economics. So I have corn and soybean farmers who are looking at it as a potential 3rd crop. They are looking at taking out 5, 10, 15 acres, and they're close to a utility substation, and they want to put in solar. Now, what do their neighbors think about that? What are they, they're getting a certain messages from the solar developers, but I think extension, we just have a lot of resources around that, but it's something that farmers across the country are going to have to start thinking through, is what do they want to do with their land when they are approached by a developer about solar. And a lot of it has to do with the size of the project and what they think about it, what their neighbors think about it. Is this a good use of prime ag land or not? So I just think that this is something that extension people across the country, whether or not it's tied into thinking about climate or not, for these farmers, it's all economics. So I have corn and soybean farmers who are looking at it as a potential 3rd crop. They are looking at taking out 5, 10, 15 acres, and they're close to a utility substation, and they want to put in solar. Now, what do their neighbors think about that? What are they, they're getting a certain messages from the solar developers, but I think extension has a role to play in being a little bit of a honest broker in making sure that they're thinking through all the pieces of that puzzle, because it's going to be an interesting puzzle for a lot of folks. I mean, there's great potential. I'm excited about it, but there's also ways it could be screwed up. So I think that's something that all of us may have a role to play. I mean, depending on your states and depending on whether or not solar is viable, which sometimes has to do with what the utilities want. They're ultimately sometimes calling the shots here. If you have good policy in place and good utilities who are interested in solar, then you'll have solar development, and if not, not so much. But
along those lines, one of the discussions that's taking place with some like Georgia Power, for an example, we're engaged in a project. Like what crops can we use under the solar panels? And so that is a major discussion that's taking place as solar panels goes in. And so
yeah, I would love to
we open for ideas. Go ahead.
Maybe offline we can share some resources, because it depends on what perennials, what pollinators are proper, grow the best for your state. We have some folks also doing research on dairy, but you would raise the solar up and it'd be used for shading for cattle. Don't get goats though, man. They'll eat anything. So.
well, we don't let the goats in because they'll climb on top of the solar panels.
Exactly. Big problems. We don't want that.
Okay. Thank you. You see the contact information, and it will be available. We want to take this time again to thank Chuck Ross for really his idea along the line of climate change and the conversation that as I stated, that we had over the weeks, and also for conducting the meeting this afternoon. Thanks everyone for taking time out and to participate in this conversation. Our participants, thanks for sharing, and thanks for just sharing and sharing your experience with us, and we really appreciate this opportunity. Have a great weekend. Thank you.